Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us wherever you are and on whatever platform you are listening on. We're here today to bring to you and discuss a topic that admittedly I don't know a lot about, and I'll explain why. While yes, I do know about coaching basketball and playing basketball, I also know all of that from the perspective of somebody who grew up in America and has only lived in America. And as we all know, the game of basketball is international, and we have coaches who are international as well. So today we're going to talk about basketball specifically in the UK and coaching basketball in the UK. And this topic will not only be interesting to all of the coaches listening stateside, but it'll also probably be more relevant than you might think when we talk a little bit about the connection between stateside and basketball in the UK. So to discuss this topic and bring their insight, I'm really fortunate and very happy to be joined by Coach Clive Castillo. Coach, how are you today?
I'm very well, Coach. Thank you for having me on today. It's a pleasure to be on here.
It's a pleasure to have you and to get your insight and get your perspective, because admittedly, a lot of people don't necessarily think of basketball when they think of the UK. But as we're going to talk about, the game is growing and there is more demand, I believe, for basketball. So I am excited to get into that. But Coach, let's get started with you, your basketball journey, your coaching journey, where you've been, where it's taken you, and what you're currently doing right now.
Great, Coach. So my name is Clive Castillo. I've been coaching at the University of Westminster in London for the past 5 years, where I fell in love with the game of basketball. I am actually, my background is from the Philippines. So in the Philippines, basketball is the number one sport. So getting into the sport, I think naturally was going to happen. My father played, so a lot of that, I used to see a lot of pictures of him playing, little videos I used to watch as well. So I really got into the game through him. I started probably playing competitively very late compared to say the athletes that really want to get into basketball. So I didn't actually play in what we call primary school here, which is I believe younger from age 11 under.
Yeah.
And then so high school, I started playing here was very, very late, because unfortunately with basketball, it's not the number one sport in the UK. So it's football and rugby and all these other sports, but basketball is not number one. It's now more aware, more popular within the London community now and the UK community, which is really good to see. But I was quite late joining. So again, my fundamentals and skill set wasn't the best, but I always had a really, really strong work ethic. So I kind of grew the passion through high school, joined my first team around 15, 16, which is very late again. But I was more of a street ball. I used to play a lot in the park where I used to have fun with my friends. How it usually starts, isn't it? And then you get introduced into organized ball and you realize, oh my goodness, this is a whole different world. And then from then, 16, 17, just kind of continued to play. I was actually quite tall for a Filipino, they said. So I'm 6'1". So I thought maybe I should pursue this, but ultimately I wasn't at that skill level and I didn't have the athleticism to kind of pursue it to a higher level. I tried actually playing in the Philippines when I was 19, 20. So I played in a few leagues out there. And then eventually went back here to kind of study and get my degree. And I played university level here. Actually played in the school that I'm coaching in. So I played at Westminster for 3 years under Coach Michael Case, which was really, really good. Great experience. Played and traveled around Europe, played actually against Team USA. So they were athletes made up of Division 3 and NIA athletes as well, that was a fantastic experience for me. And yeah, so that was pretty much my playing. My actual background is I'm a designer. So through my education and through basketball was actually a creative. So I was doing a lot of digital and design work, web design, graphic design. So after graduating, I actually went into the design field. So I became a digital designer in the industry. But I always wanted to kind of keep basketball part of my life. So this is a very long story. I do apologize, Coach.
No, it's great.
So yeah, I wanted to keep design part of my life. So no, basketball part of my life. So I decided to coach on the side, kind of coach in the community, juniors. Eventually here in the UK, you need a coaching level. So I eventually got my coaching levels here. I think USA Basketball do something quite similar as well. But they do it here, and they do feedback coaching levels in Europe as well. So I managed to get my coaching level 2 and my level 3 here in the UK, which helped me coach at higher levels, because you need the levels to be able to coach at clubs. Eventually, after designing, I ended up becoming a coach at the University of Westminster, as well as becoming a lecturer there. So I'm a lecturer at the university, and I actually lecture in digital and design while coaching out in the university program too. So kind of like what they do, I believe, in JUCOs and certain programs where tutors and lecturers have to be coaches as well. So that's kind of what I'm balancing at the moment where I am at Westminster, and I've been there for 5 years doing that. So it's been a long road to get there. I really enjoy what I do. I love the kind of impact and the passion. I love the impact that I have on the students, and it's nice that I can work on my passion every day and work with the game of basketball, and also teaching and being a coach. It's something which I really enjoy.
Yeah, and with such a long journey, there's so much that you pick up along the way that's probably molded you into your coaching philosophy and in your teaching philosophy. Like, there's so much that you can draw upon and pick up on, and so having those wide array of experiences, I think, just adds to your knowledge and your skill set and things that you get to pull from. So it's great to have that long journey. I'm sure. It's I can imagine sometimes it when you actually articulate it and say it back, you're like, wow, that is quite the journey that I've been on. So one of the things that you in particular are passionate about is that your belief when it comes to coaching and working with players is that things should be fun and that things should be positive. It's a big part of your identity. And sometimes I know when we get into coaching, we kind of forget to smile, or we forget to have fun. And it's especially interesting for you, for somebody who coaches at the university level, to make sure that you're keeping that in mind when perhaps other coaches don't necessarily share that same outlook. So why is that something that is so important to you, and how do you make sure that you're remaining positive and you're keeping things fun when you're coaching?
So great question. So I've been fortunate enough to work at different age levels. So I'm still coaching at primary schools here, and also I coach at high school, which we call secondary schools as well. So I go, as you mentioned, coach different age levels. So university, especially at the level I work in, the athletes, like you mentioned, it's very structured and is very, as you said, it's hard to keep the element of fun. As well as when you're coaching kids, that's all you want to implement. You want to see the kids smile, and you really want to have a great session with them, and you want them to learn. Whereas coaching at the university level, I have athletes, for example, that graduate NCAA, that played 3 years in D2, D3, and they're tired of learning. They've been through that system. They just want to play, and they want to get a pro contract. So making it fun for them is difficult. That's a challenge. And we do get quite a few master students come through the university program. I guess the most thing to make fun, especially at that level, is challenging, gamifying situations, making drills more competitive. That way, especially at that age group, that's fun to them. They want to be challenged, and they want to have. And they want to be able to come to sessions knowing that they'll learn and feel there's something different. Otherwise, if they come into the same drills, same routines, same kind of plays, it can get quite bored, especially for the athletes. So especially at the university level, mixing it up, trying to come up with different drills, different situations. As I mentioned, gamifying things, making sure that it's a challenge for them. I've always noticed it's a different sort of fun. It's not the funs where everyone's smiling and high-fiving each other, but it's fun in their eyes where it's very challenging and it gets quite competitive. Whereas with the kids, you come up with very different drills and different fun games, and you can see the kids are really, really enjoying it. Whereas at the university level, the fun is more like when I walk past them in the change room or the locker room and they say, "That was a good session, coach." I said, "Yeah, it was." That's where I think especially with the age gaps that I've noticed, especially coaching at different age groups in the UK.
Yeah. Well, I think that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of your responsibility too when you're coaching really at that youth level with the younger kids, especially as you're attempting to kind of grow and expand the game of basketball in the UK, I feel like it's very important for you to make sure that your players are, for a lack of a better term, falling in love with the game and want to continue playing it, because there are other options and things that are, a little bit more popular.
No, I agree, 100%, coach,
Mhm.
and that's the way. Like you mentioned, it's the style that you coach at that age as well. You don't want to be that rigorous coach where you're just fundamentally trying to teach them this is drill, 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 whereas you're implementing more of the fun side, which
Mhm.
you mentioned. And like as you can see, and as you mentioned, it's more important that they fall in love with the game rather than especially at that age, if it's a bit too much of a weight and it's very heavy on them, then they can fall out of love with the game and
Mhm.
they won't appreciate it and they end up following something else, maybe a
Mhm.
different sport. So I
Mhm.
completely agree.
And with that, as we kind of look at the other end, kind of at the university level, one of the things that I'm curious about is you probably have players that you've coached who have been in these rigorous schedules and rigorous with training, and basketball has been very, very important to them and they've taken it very seriously. And one of the things that I know coaches even here stateside are sometimes worried about is that by the time they get to that university level, that they're burned out because basketball is like all they've been doing, or their sport is all they've been doing, and they kind of lose why they started playing it in the first place. Is that similar to the UK? Do you find that you have to be mindful of making sure that your players aren't burned out because basketball is like all they've done, or sports all that they've done kind of growing up?
Um, I'm kind of grateful in a way because with the American athletes that do come from the stateside, um, usually they take a break from the game. So
Mm,
they after they graduate from NCAA or college or wherever they played, they're taking a game because they feel burnt out. They feel tired from playing for a numerous amount of years and not getting any rewards out of it. For example, not getting pros. So when they come into the UK, usually they kind of have a burst of energy. They're kind of searching back for their passion because they have a chance to play the game again and they have a purpose to play it because they're in a new country, a new city. They have to prove themselves. So the motivation's there back again. So with the Americans, it's more of the opposite. They kind of want want the structure back when they come back. So they normally join the program and they want to train three to 2 to 3 times a day. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources here in the UK to provide that.
mhm,
But they actually miss that student athlete culture. But I try to rebuild that in Westminster, especially with the program. When I took over, they didn't have a structured program and they had a basketball team, but that's where I came in to kind of implement my style. And I was really fascinated with the American model, how colleges um, molded their programs around the athletes, how they built their athletes, strength and conditioning, training programs, preseason, on season. I was really fascinated about this. And a lot of coaches and a lot of people said I wouldn't be able to kind of put this into the UK game. But I feel like within 5 years, my university is now competing within the top 12 universities in London, which we never had before. And I think it's working in my eyes. So
yeah.
I guess it's if you want to be the best, you kind of have to learn from the best. And I always see the Americans setting the standard for the game of basketball,
Mhm,
especially at the collegiate level. So
mm. Well, that's great to hear that they can kind of fall in love, with the game again, because I know that we're really concerned, at least I am, and some of the coaches I talk to stateside about players who do get burnt out and all they're doing is playing year round and they don't get to be a teenager or they don't get to be a kid or they don't even play other sports and they're just so single-minded focused that it's refreshing to hear that, you know, maybe a new change in scenery or a new location or just a new dynamic can kind of reawaken that love for basketball because, you know, we would hate to have these really successful players, you know, just completely burn out and not want to play anymore just because that's all they've been doing. So that's great
I
to hear.
mean, I agree, Coach. Just on touching on that
Yeah.
point, I mean, there was a statistic with the NCAA athletes. I think it was over 50 to 60% of athletes that do not actually get a pro contract. I think it's actually even higher than that, that actually who graduate from colleges. So when they do come to UK, as you mentioned, the opportunities to make pro, not just for basketball, but for other sports. A lot of these athletes have a kind of like a second chance.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that when they do come here, they have that mindset. But a lot of the athletes that don't make it, that 70 to, which I mentioned, that 70% plus, what I hear the stories, they end up working in local retail stores or just working in their hometowns after being such, you know, high level athletes, being on the spotlights. I had a Division 1 athlete actually interested in joining our program and he played Final Fours. So these are things which the system, I think, needs a better way of aligning and helping the athletes get to where they want to be. Because as you said, they work so hard for 4 or 5 years, even more, you know, when they're even in juniors in high school. And they can get burned out. And unfortunately, if there's no degree or there's nothing in basketball for them after, they end up just getting normal jobs, which is completely fine.
Yeah.
But it's quite sad because you still want them to be involved with the game of basketball. So
Yeah, and it's a topic of discussion that I know I've had here on this podcast, and by the time that this comes out, there'll be other episodes that address that about players and their identity, and not just having their identity wrapped up in being in a sport. Because even those who do play professionally, they're going to stop playing at some point and they're going to have this whole other part of their life ahead of them. And to make sure that, and it's one of the big things for me personally is just growing players through basketball and that just teaching them basketball is not our only goal as coaches, and making sure that we're giving them a skill set and things that they need beyond basketball, and that we invest in them more than just basketball players, and that, you know, in the high school level, that we have those conversations about like, hey, like, what do you want to do when you go to university? Like, what do you want to do as your career? And that just that investment in them as people so that they see more to themselves as just basketball players is really important, especially with the statistics you said. And like you said, nothing wrong with working in retail or doing things of that nature. But then I also wonder, were their coaches having those conversations with them about like, what else are you interested in? What else do you want to pursue? It's a fascinating topic to think about.
I agree, Coach, 100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
So let's kind of talk about this progression here that happens in the UK in terms of the way basketball is coached, in terms of primary all the way through the university level, because while there probably are similarities stateside, there's also probably some differences in your structure and the organization and the way that that's handled. So for a player at a very young age who's ready to get started, let's just assume that they're going to make it to university. We'll just put this hypothetical out there. What are the steps of progression for a player in the UK to start playing, and then how do they work their way up to get ultimately, let's just say, to university? We'll start with that first.
Cool. So usually at primary school level, there are clubs, say if you're a good basketball club, they normally have programs within primary school. So they'll come in, these are either semi-pro or pro basketball players. They'll come in and say hello to the students. They'll also deliver some sessions. And if you're really good at that age and there's a lot of potential, you'll either get scouted to either go to the club. So this could be a pro club or a semi-pro club, and join what we start from under 12s. I know America starts from really, really young, isn't it? Pee-wee age. And I know you have all those divisions. But our actual national league level, where we actually have an official league, is under 12. So they'll usually find their local club, and if it's a professional club, semi-pro club, they'll start training. And usually from this, it's the same in the secondary schools as well, which is high schools to you guys. In the secondary schools, they have basketball sessions after school. We also have breakfast clubs. Some clubs actually operate within schools, so they'll be teaching within the schools, and they have like a partnership. Or there'll be coaches that come in there from other clubs, and then they do it as a freelance, and then they may see a talent. And then if you're talented, if you have, say, a potential and a prospect, you'll get forwarded to the right coaches. And what we have here is a basketball academy, so kind of similar to America, I believe, and in Europe. So the top level basketball academies here will get sent kids, and of course they have to sign up. Usually they don't even have to try out because they've already been recommended. But these basketball academies are set up very, very kind of like I believe they're AAU programs. Very, very similar. Like they're very well structured. Top coaches in the UK. They train probably 2-3 times a day as well, and they're within schools, so they'll be able to transfer schools, go within these basketball academies which are built in the school, and get their education there while playing basketball. So you do have to get scouted at a young age, and then basketball academies will recruit you from, say, 11 to 12. And through up to 16, you'll be playing at a top level academy here in the UK, where there's opportunities to represent the country, which is England, because a lot of those coaches are England and Great Britain coaches. And you have a lot of opportunities to, say, play internationally, because they attend and compete in tournaments abroad as well. So those are the ways that, to me, how athletes get pathways which athletes can really progress in basketball England. And once they attend these academies, these top academies, they start being put on the circuit and the map. So they start playing what we call National League here. So National Basketball League is the main league which is across the nation. And if you're playing for academy, you are going to get spotted, and you are going to play international. So say a kid has been scouted and he's already joined the academy, he's represented England, 16, 17, then what we call senior high school in America, we call here colleges. So from 16 to 18, we actually call that college. So they will either attend a basketball academy, which has a college as well. And these colleges have their own leagues in the UK, in England. And then these colleges, again, you can kind of pick a talent. So this is an under-19 league, and it's the top colleges and basketball academies in the UK, in England, that are competing for that. Sorry. And then usually what happens after that is the talent gets spotted or gets sent to America. So these basketball academies have links to coaches in America who are from colleges, maybe NIAA or these prep academies or these JUCOs or NCAA, and they're already kind of have a link ready to kind of recruit kids from the UK to play in America. So one of the main ones was Lil Deng when he was younger. So Lil Deng, Chicago Bulls. He's retired now, I believe.
Yes.
But Lil Deng was one of the first, in a way, the pioneer to set the standard of the UK talent going through to America. But now there's several talents coming through. A few of them actually play in the NBA. But usually it's, if you're good enough when you're young, you get put in these basketball academies. And if you can shine in these academies, then you end up actually having a chance to play in America and get further in your career. So, and then if that doesn't happen, if you don't get picked up by American college, usually there are scholarships in the UK and universities here as well that can also give them opportunities to study and play here too.
Well, a few things. Definitely. Shout out to Luol Deng. I grew up outside Chicago, so I remember in the late 2000s, like Luol Deng and like Ben Gordon, they were like stars kind of where I grew up, and I know that those were UK players. So
Ben Gordon,
shout out to the two of them. Now, I want you to clarify something, and I don't know if I misunderstood it, or maybe I understood it perfectly. It seems like the players, if they get recruited or spotted at a young age, is there education in terms of like mathematics and reading and science education, is that directly like tied into athletics, meaning that the schools that they're going to, like they're going to almost like schools for athletes, and that they're getting their education, but then it's also like tied into them playing sport as well?
Yeah, precisely. So you hit it on the nail on the first one. So um, they get recruited to these schools. So, but there used to be only a few of them out there. So they're what we call basketball academies here in the UK, but they're built within secondary schools. But now there's so many. There's quite a few out there now. There's some outside London, so they actually provide accommodation and dorms for the athletes to move out there. They do their education, they study there, and they play basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually can get their what we call the GCSEs and their qualifications through there as
Mm.
well. So yeah, there is the educational aspect, which is very, very important. I believe so.
So in these academies, are they, is it all athletes? They're all athletes together?
Yes.
So, hmm,
So there's some colleges. There's one called Myerscough College. There's another one, Barking Abbey. The two probably main ones in the UK. Um, Again, they're schools in itself, but they
yeah,
have a separate basketball academy inside it, which is very elite athlete
yeah.
focused. So they really build that solely, and the timetables are scheduled for them. So, for example, they have individual sessions during the day. They do gym workouts. They do etc.
Mm,
All the basketball stuff, as well as getting their education.
mm,
And they have separate timetables to what usual students have.
mm.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Okay. No, yeah, that's fascinating. That is something I didn't know. It's not quite that way. We have schools here that are very well known for their sports, and people know athletics at those schools, but they're not necessarily like academies in the sense where it's just like all the athletes together, and then they're getting their education through that. So it sounds like you said it. It sounds like it works well. So that is fascinating. Something new. I knew I was going to learn a lot through this conversation. So I
I
got
mean, I
this so
mean,
far.
I mean, Coach. I mean, I think 10 to 15 years ago there wasn't that many out there,
Hmm.
but now
Mm,
there's a lot more of these academies available. But I
yeah,
guess because basketball is, like as I mentioned, it's not as popular.
right.
It's so where there is an academy, they kind
Yeah,
of built it specifically for that sport. Whereas
right.
in I can imagine in America, it's more common, right? It's everywhere.
Hmm.
All these high schools have basketball teams,
Yeah,
whereas in the
right.
UK, not all colleges and not all schools have basketball teams here, unfortunately.
Hmm.
So people used to find an academy specific for it, but
Hmm.
now there's so many there, players have more options, which is great. I mean, the standard has now gone up, which means
Right.
players have more options these days. It's not just that school has the 12 best players in the UK. It's now becoming a lot more open to different academies, which is good.
Right. Well, oh, that's good for the overall all growth of the game,
Mm.
that these sort of these academies and these exist, because at least here in the States, one of the things that we have is that there are certain sports that are just played regionally, and that, for example, here in Arizona, if you're interested in playing lacrosse at any level, like I don't know of any lacrosse programs that exist within our state, but then it's not necessarily easy to just like say, oh, we're going to up and move just to go play lacrosse or some of these other sports. So I think it's good that those academies do exist, and that it sounds like it's growing, because you made mention that they didn't exist 10 to 15 years ago. So hopefully that kind of speaks to the growth of basketball, and at least people being more aware of playing basketball as an option like any other sport. So that's good. That's encouraging for me to hear.
Mhm.
Now, um, here, I guess you'll clarify this, but I get the sense that at least in other parts of the world, that there is a perception of like a stereotypical American player, or what an American player looks like. So I'm gonna kind of flip that with the UK, in that, is there a progression in terms of what a UK player would look like in terms of the principles and the things that they're learning at a younger age? And let's say they're learning that in, an academy anywhere in the UK, would there be similarities in the way that the game is taught, in the fundamentals that are taught, or is there kind of variety, and do all UK players have like a little bit of variation within them?
The thing with the UK, it's interesting because especially London is one of the most diverse cities in the world.
Hmm.
So when people say what kind of basketball style that we play in London, it's hard to say because a lot of the coaches are from all around Europe. So we get
Yeah.
coaches from Serbia, we get coaches from Spain, and I would say it's a European style basketball. It's a very generic answer, I know, but it's hard to kind of distinguish what is GB basketball, what is basketball to a UK style, because there are just so many different coaches in the UK that. For example, when I was growing up, my coach was Serbian, you know,
Mhm.
and he was very focused on fundamentals, probably if not the best coach in London, still to today in my eyes. But he was very focused on fundamental drills, movements. We used to do a lot of ball just for an hour. It was just us with a basketball doing just single drills, dribbling drills, just
Mhm.
by ourselves, and just stretches before we actually got into a game. So there's different styles, I would say. But if I'm comparing it to, say, an American, because I've seen UK athletes go to America, and I've
Mhm.
also coached American athletes. I would say the American athletes um, are very good decision makers. They're very quick in the pace that they play, and I don't necessarily know how in a way that could be taught unless it's taught from the grassroots and it's taught from just the pace of the game in America, because I feel that when UK players go there they struggle with the pace. That's one thing that I
Mhm.
noticed is the Americans are just very in decision making. They're about two to even less than 1 second, much quicker, which I noticed when coaching stateside athletes. And also the mindset of Americans as well. They really the competitiveness, especially I believe you have sports introduced at a very young age, not just basketball but different sports. I think having these tournaments and having these variety of sports growing up helps build the competitiveness. We don't really have that in the UK. We're not really a sporting country. So when a lot of our athletes go to America, I think they're kind of caught by surprise on how competitive it is. Like no one's gonna really put their hands out and be your teammate in that sense, and give you a spot on the team, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You have to earn everything, and especially if you're coming from UK, as you said, we have this kind of perception of we don't play basketball in the UK. No one's really heard of UK basketball players.
Mhm.
So that's what I've seen. I hope that answers the question. It's
Yeah.
hard to kind of define the style.
Right. Right. So have you taken any of that in terms of your experience, kind of as you've worked with American players? Obviously you worked with those in the UK, you've been coached under ones all across the world. Has that kind of shaped your mindset and how you coach and work with players at a younger level? Because I know that you still do have experience working with players at a very youth level.
That's a good question, actually. I think, especially when I coach at the younger level, I think it's it's more because I don't really coach a program. It's more of sessions that I come in to
Right.
help the community, um, and it's more, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's developing that fun aspect, helping them grow the love
Hmm.
for the game, rather than teaching them an actual kind of style of playing of basketball. Or rather, especially at the younger age, we focus on the fundamentals, um, and uh, when I coach at the higher levels, that's when I start to see the different styles of basketball. So when I coach against teams that I say from different areas of UK, or if I've gone to an international tournament and I coach teams, for example, teams like from Lithuania or Serbia, they're they're very structured and rigorous. They have a system in place and they follow that system, and they're taught that system from a very young age,
Right.
which why they excel so well on the international stage. For example, if they have world tournaments, they play very well because they understand it's a system. Whereas in America, A lot of the style is one-on-one. A lot of the style is wing play, and that's getting shown a lot on YouTube, and people being a lot of aware of this. And people think this is the style of playing a basketball, but when you go to a world stage, it's quite difficult to compete in that level, especially if you don't have a strong team and players that have the fundamentals, which is why teams like Korea, Lithuania, Serbia do exceptionally well on the world stage, because they're taught at a young age, this is how basketball is played, and it's fundamental. This is the drills that we need to do, and this is how you need to take it to a serious level. And I don't think UK do it to that extent yet. We're getting there, especially with the popularity growing, and the amount of coaches growing. That's really important.
Yeah.
If it's not in the culture of the country, then it's quite difficult to build it, and it takes a while. But I think the GB team has actually done pretty well. Our under 16s did quite well last year in the FIBA tournaments, and our under 18, so it's growing, especially our women's team as well. So yeah, there's so many different styles of basketball. I actually prefer the American style. I love the fast-paced game.
Okay, let's get into that then. What
I
have
love
you
the
implemented?
the transition style. Well, a lot of my uni team is run and gun. We do a lot of transition style basketball, and we like to, as I mentioned, run and gun, shoot the ball, open shots. We play a lot of. In Europe, they like to, in terms of the screens. Well, this is more of the college. I feel like the more sophisticated type game situations. So, for example, reading screens. The Europeans like to kind of show and recover. They always like that, or hedge screens as they call it. Whereas, we like to kind of learn. Well, I like to teach my guys how to defend in the post. So we like to switch screens and get potential mismatches, see how that works, and then kind of teach our defenders how to be better defenders in the post. These are little things that I like, because it's kind of, it flows with the game well, and it kind of puts our players in better positions where they're more comfortable. Whereas the European style, I've coached international athletes from Greece, from Romania, and they're you can tell, especially with the bigs, they like to show, they know their positioning in that way. So it's a mix, because it's so diverse in the UK. I get a different bunch of athletes, but I do like the run and gun style. People say that's the American style basketball, but it's hard to define it really.
Yeah.
It'd be good to get your views on what you think, of course, being in the States.
My image of a kind of like a European, and I'll admit I don't really have an image in my mind of what a UK basketball looks like, just because the ones I think of are Luol Deng and Penn Gordon, which isn't necessarily a reflection of UK basketball. But when I think of European basketball, I think of very like regimented. I think of very systematic and just very precise. Maybe that's the best word to put it. Like everything has a purpose. Things are done a certain way, in a specific way. And I think part of that is because I think in some of those countries like Lithuania and Serbia, a lot of those players play with each other a lot, and they've also sort of like grown up with each other, and they're very used to each other, and there's how they play and what they do. Versus I think in America, by the time we're playing a world stage, it's almost like we're just pulling players who haven't really played much together, even grew up playing together, and that's I think what leads to maybe more of that like one-on-one and just sort of do your own thing. Because I think a lot of the US players, when they play at an international stage, just aren't really used to playing with each other in the way that maybe those in like Lithuania and Serbia and Korea and those other countries are. I could be totally wrong, but at least that's my perception as one stateside coach.
No, I agree. I think absolutely that's really true. For example, teams like Greece as well, you can put in there Spain. These are the teams are usually collectively, they're built up from the junior programs. So under 16s, under 18s, they've represented national teams together. The chemistry is already there. Whereas America, like you said, they're pulled at different times. And unfortunately, as talented as they are, because in the past they can get away with it because they have so much talent. But the way the basketball is evolving, you can see the level of Europe's actually increasing just through the, like you said, being systematic, being regimented, having these programs and these national teams where they're investing a lot more. And you can see America's actually competing a lot more with these teams now than it used to be, say, 10, 15 years ago, when they used to just dominate basketball, especially in the world stage. So, Yeah, it's an interesting style. Like, but I definitely, especially for example, like high school in America, you see some of the score lines. They're quite crazy, isn't it? They go over 100. You know, it's just pretty much they score on one end. There's not much defense being played. I mean, this is the stuff that you see on highlight reels, and I don't know if that's really good for basketball, because when they get to a high level, it's going to be quite difficult, especially if they go to college and play in, say, pro levels like NBA or Europe. Basketball's not played in that way. So.
Yeah. Well, and I've probably said this a couple times on other episodes, but excuse me, I think it's really true that at least here in America, we have a lot of players who play so many games that they lose the importance of playing a game, to the point where like playing defense and doing some of those things might not be as interesting to them, or they might not care as much about it, only just because they're playing so much that the importance of that individual game that they play, if it's, just one game that they play out of 1,000, just metaphorically speaking, that year, then defense is what it is. I just need my opportunity to go and score. Like, okay, yeah, whatever, you scored, now it's my turn. And that's a very gross generalization, but it's one of those things that I hear come up a lot, is the concern that we have, at least here stateside, is that players are playing so much that they almost lose a little bit of competitiveness, and that it kind of needs to be reawakened in them if they want to go play at like a university or a collegiate level. So that's just what we have here a little bit, but it doesn't encompass every player, but it's something that we do notice.
I mean, just to add to that,
Yeah.
Coach Gino from UConn actually mentioned that as well. He said, for example, in America, it was on a podcast, I think he said it, it's on YouTube. He said in America, they play 3, 4, 5 games a week even, whereas athletes want to play games in America. Whereas in Europe, they're training that many times, but playing less games.
Yep.
You're using that time to train more and work on their fundamentals, work on their craft. Whereas America is like, we have different tournaments here and there. Athletes are getting pulled. You can play in this tournament. What would you rather do, train or play? And a lot of the athletes choose to actually play. So there, it goes to your point, is athletes want to just play games now. Whereas that's why I think with the Europe game, the fundamentals are really growing, and the standard of Europe basketball is really growing, because they are building from that training basis, which is pretty good.
So to kind of go with that, because you talked about how you're kind of bringing in players from all different parts, and then they're coming from everywhere, of different styles that they're used to playing. Has that transition been easy for you to kind of implement that run and gun and the style that you want? This kind of speaks more to also like team building and relationship building, but have you found that it was easy for players, let's say, if you have somebody like from Greece, or somebody stateside, or players coming in from all over the place, has it been easy to kind of get them to buy into your system and kind of buy into playing with each other? Or has that been like a growing process and a learning process that you've been through?
It's been difficult.
Yeah.
That's a great question. It's been difficult. Unfortunately, not everyone really likes likes that game of style of basketball, because unfortunately, with the run and gun, only certain players are going to get more touches and a lot more points than the others. Unfortunately, and you get a lot more role players in that sort of system, whereas you get, especially with our American guard this year, him and my other starting guard, they were the guys that were pretty much leading the run and gun. So yeah, it's difficult to get them to buy in, but I always believe when you win, the whole team's happy. Even the guy at the end of the bench is happy. So it's I think if it's not working and we're losing games, then I think it would be a lot more of an issue with the players. But because they see the systems working, it's more of collectively seeing it's the ultimate goal. For example, this season, the team went undefeated. We won the league championship, which meant we got promoted to Division 1, which is top 12 in the UK now. And also we won the kind of conference cup, so we get put in a knockout cup as well. So we won that cup tournament. So we did the double, which was which was impressive. Something that's never really been done at Westminster. Something I've never witnessed, to be honest, and I should give them a lot more credit than I do, because doing an undefeated season, I think it's a remarkable feat. I don't think many people realize how hard it is to kind of build that winning culture and that winning consistency, because it's a habit, isn't it? And it's difficult to do that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and especially with the situation that you're in, and it causes a lot of reflection on my end, because the girls that I coach are all from like the same neighborhood, the same area. They all know each other really well, and so team building for me isn't necessarily maybe as much of a challenge as it is for you. So on a personal level with that, because obviously you did have some great success. Do you have an emphasis at all on like the players being comfortable with each other or around each other, or is it like we're just going to focus on basketball and the basketball is going to be what unifies with each other? Because I can picture that there might be some cultural differences just in the way people communicate and the way people talk and the way people go about their business from different parts of the world. But does that happen, or does basketball have like its own universal language that everyone can kind of bond around?
Great point. I always say basketball is a universal language in itself. I think once we step on the court, everyone, especially if you played the game, you kind of can read and play the game off each other without talking, which is amazing. But as you mentioned, being Westminster University, a university in the heart of London, one of the most diverse universities in the world. For example, I had a player from India who was played on the national team. But then also I get a player from America. So I have players all around the world, which actually come to join the team, which is quite unique in my eyes. Like you said, coaching a team which is local is amazing. These girls probably grew up together and played on the same teams. They hang out with each other. Whereas in Westminster, it's more difficult. As you said, there is cultural differences. Of course, there are people from different backgrounds. It is a challenge as a coach to get them to bond together, because they're, especially at that age. I love coaching and teaching at university, because I think they're young adults and it's a key part of their lives, because if that university experience can even help shape and mold them into what they want to do in the future, especially if they have a positive experience. So I think it's a great responsibility for university coaches to be in that position. And they're pretty much young adults, so we can't really, well, I know coaches shout and kind of express their different views, but they're pretty much their own now. You know, they've probably gone through systems and coaches when they were younger where they were really yelled at, but I like to treat them as young adults. I like the Brad Stevens approach. He even admittedly said he doesn't really like to shout at his players. I like to understand my players on their level. And kind of show a lot of empathy towards how they are, who they are, where they come from, and build a family culture. A lot of people think this culture doesn't succeed because if it's purely basketball, that's how you win. But I think you can have a bit of both. I always believe that building a family culture within a basketball is very important. For example, my son comes to the practices sometimes, and he's only 2. So he's on the side, just walking around. And sometimes the players interact with him. And these are sort of things that I like as a coach, because to me, I can see their other sides. And I like to kind of build up their soft skills as well, how they interact with each other. I get them to mix with different groups and different people. So if we have classrooms, get them to sit with other people that they've never sat before. And this helps their learning and their skills and their communication. And these soft skills are really important when they graduate university as well. I don't think it's taught enough, especially with a degree on a paper. If you don't have the right soft skills and the right approach, I believe that you're not going to be employable in whatever you do. Be it a basketball player or a coach, and these are things that I try to kind of implement as part of the program, building that family culture, getting them to know each other and understand each of their backgrounds as well. That ultimately we're here to get our education, but we're here to also have good times and kind of succeed as a basketball program too. So those are the kind of things I try to. It's a difficult challenge, but it's always a challenge, especially at university level. I get students on masters that are there for 1 year, or I get undergrads that are there for 3 years. So it's forever evolving, and the turnover is crazy, but it's nice. It's nice to see the journey, especially because it goes very quickly. You being a teacher yourself, you understand.
Mm-hmm.
School years fly by very, very quickly.
Yeah, they no, without question, they fly by quickly, and again, I really like that mentality because I feel like a lot of successful coaches carry that mentality with them, where they believe that if all I ever taught you was basketball, then I haven't done a good job as a coach. If that's all I've left you with, as me as a teacher, if all I've done is just explain my subject to you, and you haven't gained those soft skills, then I think that we as coaches really do miss out on a lot more learning that our players can be having. And so it's probably invaluable, especially because I'm sure you have players who come to you who maybe don't have a lot of interaction with other cultures or people who are different than them. And so not only do they gain perspective that way, but like I said, gaining those soft skills, gaining all of these other uh, attributes that they're going to need are going to help them be so much more successful in whatever it is that they eventually go out to do. So I think you're doing the right thing and leaving them with just more than just skills in the sport, and hopefully most coaches, hopefully they have that same approach as well.
Thanks, coach. I appreciate that.
So let's talk a little bit about these players coming from all over the place. One of the strengths that you said, and we talked a little bit about, was about international recruitment and the ability to recruit players internationally. And I know that most people listening here are probably stateside, so that might be what has their interest. But that's okay. We can talk about it anywhere from the U.S. or otherwise. What's the process like for seeking out recruiting and or having players from the US come find you? How does that connection get formed?
So a lot of the recruitment actually comes from North America, so stateside. We also get Canadian athletes involved as well. Usually, after they in their final year in university, so their senior years, they'll start. A lot of student athletes start to look at where they can go. So a lot of basketball opportunities may not be available in America or Canada. I assume it's either NBA G League, or that's pretty much it for America, right?
Yeah.
So they start looking at Europe, and they start looking at different opportunities to play there. So usually getting a master's degree in America is expensive. So that's what I've heard.
Yes.
Getting a master's degree in the UK is actually relatively quite cheap compared to doing it in America. So a lot of the athletes end up coming to the UK on student visas. So they find a university which they can play, and the university leagues are good. I wouldn't say the most competitive. They're good. They're a good standard, especially if you play at Premiership and Division 1, which we're in Division 1 now. But ultimately, what they always want to look for is playing at a higher level, such as the National League, so the men's National League here, which is Division 1, which is semi-pro, or Division 2, which is classified semi-pro 2 as well. So what they can do here is they can come to the UK, get their degree, master's degree, keep on playing, rather than getting a job after graduating, which may not be sports related or something they want to do, get their master's degree, continue playing at uni level, get their education, but also play at semi-pro level, hoping that they can get signed for a pro team in, say, the BBL, which is the aim, isn't it? A lot of the BBL teams now have connections with universities. So, for example, London Lions have a good connection with the University of East London. So they're actually getting players to go on pro contracts there while studying at the university. Unfortunately, I'll be honest with you, Coach, Westminster, we don't have any strong, I would say, resources to help these athletes. And my pulling power is not compared to others. For example, I've been on around 5 to 6 Zoom calls this summer with athletes from America that have expressed interest just through finding our program, through maybe recruitment agencies that help with this process, or maybe just online, just through research. So when I had these calls, I'm I'm straight honest, and I said I can't offer scholarships. This is what we have. And someone once told me, do these athletes get quite surprised when they come to your gym, which, you know, they played at these NCAA gyms where it's got bleachers and, you know, great flooring and all these facilities. I said, well, ultimately they're here for their education and they're here to play basketball. And if they have that mindset, then I can help them and we can work together. So the athletes that I've had, I'll be honest, they've been amazing. So I've had 3 key athletes throughout the past 3 years, 1 from a D2 program, 2 from D3. And I've had the FaceTime calls as I mentioned to you, and I'm just straight up honest with them. And I always tell them that we don't have the facilities, especially we compete at the high levels now. I actually refer them to the other universities. I say the other universities have more links to pro teams than I do. But if you come to Westminster, I can still help you on that end. We can help you find a National League team. You could play, you know, you can network within the university, and as a coach, I'll do my best to look out for you. So I do actually am honest with them, because ultimately they are athletes and they have, to me, as long as they get to where they want to be, and if another university can offer that, then I'm not going to lie or kind of sell our university like we do. Fortunately, the athletes that have signed on to Westminster have just seen us for our program and what we offer, not just as a coach, but as what our mission statement, you know, helping the student athlete process, helping these athletes get, it's bigger than basketball, helping them on and off the court, helping them kind of find their feet into their careers. And not, if it's not just basketball, we kind of help them with their, for example, qualifications. I got one coach qualified, and he was helping coach the B team here, which is kind of like do you have second teams in universities as well, right? Maybe that play in not the leagues, but they have like rec leagues.
Right. Yeah.
So I got the coaches to kind of coach the second and the third teams, and they got their qualification. So I always try to better the people that are around the program, be it players or staff. So there's always opportunity to me. And once you're in London, I think with the great fact about Westminster is that it's based in London. A lot of these top universities that are sports focused and have all these facilities, London is too congested to have these universities. They're big, they require big spaces, so they're usually outside London. So a lot of the athletes that come here really want the London life, which they really like, you know. And a lot of the American athletes that come here, they actually go to France and they go to Germany, because once they're in Europe, it's a lot cheaper for them to get around as well. So they end up living the Europe life and they love it. So and we've had 3 American athletes graduate that were recruited, and they've all enjoyed the experience here. I actually had a podcast with one of my players, and we actually got him nearly signed in Germany without an agent, so which was really good. So to me, there's always opportunities somewhere, but it's great that I'm part of that process where they can kind of find a home and find a place to play basketball again.
Yeah, so it sounds like to me for players stateside who are kind of like looking, and just for example out in the UK, they definitely need to make sure that they're doing like their research and understanding that like not all university teams are created equal, and understanding like what they're trying to get out of that experience by going to the UK, because their aspirations might be basketball related, while others might be like, I can continue to play basketball, but I'm really just here for my education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important. I think yes, I totally agree, Coach. A lot of the athletes, it's make or break, so they really want to make it pro here. But a lot of the athletes that I've worked with also see the master side of it and understand that's a very important aspect, and that will help them. As you said, after the career finishes, having a master's degree opens doors, especially in America as well. I believe if you have a master's degree, you can coach and teach. Which is a great opportunity, which I advise some of my players, but they don't want to touch coaching. They don't like coaching, and they show a lot of thank gratitude to my job and say, I don't know how you do it, coach, but I always try to say, that's an option because you have your master's degree. But ultimately, yes, it's the research that's the most important, and that's what I advise athletes from America to look at, because sometimes, the best options are not the top universities are not your best options. Sometimes it's finding the right fit for you. So, and that comes through research and talking. Like, I speak to my athletes through Instagram. It's a new way of communicating, but
Yeah.
I think it's the easiest possible way to get to athletes, especially student athletes, especially from the younger generation. They love Instagram. They're always active, and they actually reach out to me through Instagram. And sometimes I like to be formal. I like things in email, but sometimes you just kind of have to understand their way of communication and build a relationship through there. So I think that's part of recruitment as well, is understanding how to speak to athletes on their level. So
Yeah, no, definitely. You have to kind of know what works for them in order to build that relationship and the way that they feel comfortable communicating. And I can imagine that for some stateside athletes, they might have a little bit of concern, or they going to the UK, is a big leap for them, and it might not be something they ever considered doing before. So to build that connection with them and kind of make them feel comfortable and make them feel that they have somebody who cares for them and has their best interest, I think it has to be vital in order to successfully recruit on any level, let alone an international level.
I agree, Coach. A lot of the athletes that come here, they don't have family here. They're pretty much, as you mentioned, a lot of trust has to be put in that process,
Hmm.
and I agree.
Yeah. So for in your experience, do you have, this is just more out of my own curiosity, do you have players who come, like, let's say from stateside, who get their education and that was their main focus, and then they go back stateside? Do some like it enough that they end up staying and being around in Europe? Like, I'm just curious as to if there's any retention where players come and then they just end up like loving it, and they don't have much of a desire to come back stateside.
It's probably definitely the latter. Once they come to London, they actually don't want to come back to stateside. I feel like a lot of the athletes, they come, they get their degree. For example, my latest athlete, Milo, he just flew back to London now. Um, he just loves it here. I think when he goes back to stateside, they just find that routine and find that kind of usual circle, and I don't know, they don't feel challenged. Whereas in London, they feel a lot more motivated to do a lot more things, and they feel the networking opportunities to play and kind of go Europe or anywhere else is a lot more open in London than being all the way in, say, Miami or in America. So
Mhm.
definitely, I agree with you. It's the latter for sure.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, I can imagine for you, as somebody who maybe helped in the recruiting process, or helped with that, to not only recruit a player, but then also to have them fall in love with the area so much that they want to stay there. I can imagine is a pretty good feeling to have, to know that you're able to kind of bring that experience and give that experience to them.
No, I agree, and then it's actually, I really want to coach at the high level. So if
Hmm.
I see athletes from America who, um, I would say some of these athletes have slipped through the cracks, as they say, because I believe that some of the athletes I've coached over the years shouldn't be playing D2. They should be playing actually higher. I think D1. But as you know, basketball is a system, and it's very, in a way, who you know business, and it's unfortunately some of these athletes do not get those opportunities to play at those top programs, but you could tell they can play. So when I get elite athletes that come in and actually um, be part of our program, and they kind of really express themselves, they really enjoy the game.
Hmm.
That to me is, I really smile and get a joy out of watching, because I can see them in what they do best and their true talents. And it's really, really good to see, especially, like you said, being part of the journey. So it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, well, it's something that you said just kind of tied back into something that we just talked about, where you talked about how some of these athletes might slip through the cracks, and they might not get noticed, and about the need for in some cases for these athletes, about who they know. But all of that also kind of comes back into those soft skills that we talked about their ability to communicate, that ability to network, that ability to advocate for themselves. And I think that that's something else that's really important for coaches to keep in mind, is that we need to empower our athletes and kind of give them those skills, and give them the tools they need to advocate for themselves, so they don't necessarily end up as somebody who like falls through the cracks and wasn't able to kind of play at the level they should have, just because they weren't lacking talent, but they were lacking the ability to communicate and advocate for themselves. So I think that kind of just tied back something that we talked about just now.
Absolutely. I agree, Coach.
Yeah. So to wrap up what I want to do, and this was really insightful and this is really great. This is funny because this moment of all the conversations I have with people, I hear that this is what people really like a lot or like the most. What is a coaching moment of yours, whether it's in your sessions or coaching at university, any coaching moment of yours that you've had that you think others would be able to learn from?
This might be a strange one.
Oh, that's
So
fine.
usually when we start semester time, so I really love freshers. I really love that start of university life. Unfortunately, with the whole pandemic, everything's going to be virtual, so that's been taken away. I'll find a way to do it, but usually once we get our program, once we finish our pre-season, we get everyone in the a lecture hall, and we get some food, we order them some nice snacks, everyone gets comfortable. Then I show them some slides. One of my favorite things that I do every year is once they're in, the whole team is in the lecture hall, I show them the first slide. And the first slide is the graduates of the Westminster University during the summer. And it changes every year because ultimately we get around 6 to around 7 or 8 graduates from our first team, our major program. So it's one of my favorite things as a coach. It's one of my favorite things to do and show, because it's the end. It's the end journey. I wouldn't say the end, but it's part of the journey,
Yeah.
in which, especially the academic side. And when I normally show this, I always have like this smile on my face. I always get really proud as well, kind of like that father moment. I just kind of show it, and I say, look, this is for the rookies and freshers that come in. I said, this is where I want to see you in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want you to achieve. Whatever we do on the basketball court, that's a plus. We win championships together, that's amazing. I can recall many finals or many close games, buzzer beaters, where it's a great feeling. You can't describe that. But the feeling that I show on the board to those players, I think that's the one that really means the most to me as a coach, because that's the thing that they have for life. They have that degree for life, they have that education for life, and that's what will help get them to different places. As you mentioned in the beginning, the game of basketball, the ball, I always say the ball will stop bouncing eventually. And we have to kind of figure out what we want to do with our lives, with an education, with like you said, the what we learn, part of it, the soft skills and the kind of experiences that we grow. We can do whatever we want to do, and then I kind of show them that on the board before I start all the program talk and how the season's going to go and who we're going to face. But I think that's one of my favorite moments as a coach, and I do it every year with the guys. So.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful, because it just shows what's important to you, and it shows ultimately what's most important to you, which is the betterment of these players as individuals and as people, and where they're going to go to, and all the other stuff within basketball is great, but ultimately you want to help them along on their journey as people and as individuals, and I think that's great, and I think that does such a good job to get the players to buy in and make them understand that, again, you're there for them more than just as like a coach or just as a basketball trainer. You're there as as their advocate to kind of support them on their journey. So no, that's a great moment. I love it. So I always give coaches what I call the 60-second soapbox to kind of get out there, final thought, final idea, reemphasize anything that they thought was important from this discussion. So I'm going to give you the floor, Coach. Go ahead.
Well, first off, thank you, Coach Pike, for having me here today. It's been a pleasure to be on the podcast. It's great what you're doing, and all the other coaches and the people starting podcasts in the game. It's amazing for the game of basketball, and I encourage it more. It's really good. Overviewing what we're saying, I would love to bridge the gap more between USA and UK, especially with the basketball. I love to connect a lot more with the coaches out there, with different, not just coaches, but different people, basketball minds, and hopefully that we can actually cross paths. That's, I think, from this conversation, we can have a lot more on styles of basketball, coaching basketball, grassroots to where it is now in different levels and different backgrounds. And I think there should be more of a connection. Yes, and that's pretty much it I wanted to add.
Well, I definitely agree. It's easier now more than ever for people to get connected from anywhere in the world. And so if we're willing to put that effort in there and willing to have those conversations, ultimately it'll be for the betterment of the players and the people that we coach if we're able to provide them more opportunities and give them more options going forward. So absolutely agree. Now, before we go, I want to make sure that we can plug some stuff of yours, because I do know, among other things, that you do have a YouTube channel that you do interviews on. So Coach, you have some things you want to plug, some things that people can stay connected with?
Definitely, Coach. So I do the Coach's Call. This is a podcast where I speak to different coaches, not just coaches, but people from basketball backgrounds, and they share their stories, their inspirations. I've actually had guests that are non-basketball related, but I always found their story to be quite unique and inspiring. So if you want to check that out, it's at the Coach's Call. You can check that out on Instagram and YouTube. We're also available on Spotify and Apple Music as well. Also, I'm coaching Westminster, so you can follow our Instagram, which is at UWSU Basketball. And also, I'm starting on a new project, I'm proud to say and announce actually here. I've started a local program in my area called the Brent Bulls, which kind of ties into what our conversation about developing grassroots. So Brent Bulls is a brand new UK basketball club that's actually coaching from the ages of 4 all the way to men's, and we're going to start our program here in Brent, which is a borough in London. So very excited to work on this. I've got a great team, and yeah, you can follow our journey. That's at Brent Bulls, which will be exciting. We're a brand new program, but it's good to actually work on new projects, especially through this time during the pandemic. It's kept me quite busy.
Great. Yes. So many resources, so much stuff that you're up to, and a lot of things to follow. So great. I'm happy that all these projects you have and all these things that you're doing, a lot of ways to stay connected. So Coach Castillo, I want to thank you again. Thank you so much for kind of sharing your insight and your journey, and hopefully bridging that connection between, the States and the UK. So thank you for that, and good luck going forward, and hopefully you have some games to coach soon. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, Coach. Thank you. Stay safe, and I appreciate the time. Take care.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.